Tuesday, the 7th of April, radio.com will be joined, or we will join WFN at 6 o'clock this evening. Bob Ryan will be our guest in a couple of minutes, the longtime Boston uh, writer and media member, broadcaster, pretty much does everything, as you know. Um, well, you've heard the word, and it's been asked all over the place today. Could baseball actually be considering this Arizona plan? These are desperate times. No sport knows when it will be safe for fans to enter their buildings again. Nobody even knows how we get back from where we are right now, how we actually get out of the house again. Because as I've alluded to many times, and I know people have tired of me saying it, is the key has been something that has been forgotten. It has been forgotten in most reports every day, but it is the key to everybody's return, and that is testing, testing, and testing. Because until they get a baseline on who is healthy and who isn't, who has had the virus and who hasn't, there's no way to get anything done. And we're going to have to, whether we use our where we live as our baseline, and we do it village by village or block by block, or we do it where we work, or we do it based on schools. I think it would be everybody over the age of 16, maybe 18, but 16 probably be more likely. We do test everybody over the age of 16. And it will not be something we can do in a couple of days, but you will not be integrated back into society until you've been tested. And these tests, a lot of them aren't even available yet. They can say they are, but they're not. If you ask people, they're not. If you try and get one, you can't get one. So that's really where we are. But let's get to the baseball for a minute first. Baseball is contemplating. Now remember, how delicate is this balance that they're talking? One positive test among the rank and file of their players, and it's over. That's it. One positive test. That's all it would take. But what their plan would be is to get everybody to Arizona. Why Arizona? Well, if you've ever been to spring training in Arizona, you know that it's very, very centrally located. Unlike Florida, where sometimes there are hour bus rides and multiple hour bus rides in between games, in between sites. That's not the case in Arizona. Everything's very close to everything. And you have the use of some more modern facilities. And as we said, you can house the players. The weather's better. The weather's warmer. The weather's more predictable this time of year. And you have a better setup. But they're also talking about a lot of crazy things here. After a couple of week period, they would start the regular season. They would house the players and the umpires and broadcasters. I don't know if it'd be radio and TV or just TV. I don't know that radio would be involved. It might be on some level. We're just not sure yet. They would test, and then they would play 7-inning doubleheaders is what has been discussed. Doubleheaders has been discussed, but 7-inning doubleheaders has been discussed. There are a lot of things that would be part of this. They would house the players, and then they'd go to the games, and then back to the stadium, and then back to their locales, and then back. They would not. They would be in isolation. They would be away from everybody. They would be away from their family. There'd be no media. There might be a pool reporter for each game, something like that. But they're also talking about other things. They're talking about an electronic strike zone to keep the umpire away from home plate. No mound visits. The players being mic'd to add a little more something, enhance the broadcast. Teams sitting in the stands rather than the dugout because they could then spread out in the stands. They would have more room. They stay away from each other, and there's nobody in the stands anyway. Expanded rosters, critical. You've heard Bobby Valentine with me talk about that. You're talking about rosters that will have anywhere from 15 to 20 pitchers on a roster. You heard me right. 15, probably To start 20 pitchers on a roster, you're going to be utilizing a lot of pitchers. You're going to be utilizing them in double headers. You're going to be utilizing them every day. So you're going to need a lot of pitchers. You don't need as many everyday players, but the rosters are going to be enormous. I mean, each team could have a roster of, I would think, 40s minimum. It might even be more. It could be 50. So we're talking about a lot of players. You're talking about a very different game. And why would they go to this length? Why? Because they're desperate to get some revenue back. Their networks are desperate to get some games on, to get some product on. And this is better than nothing. Is it optimum? Highly, no. It's a long way from being optimum. Are there a lot of problems with it? Absolutely. Does it make a lot of sense? Listen, you try to be reasonable here when you look at it and understand these are desperate times. There are a lot of holes you can punch in, a lot of this stuff. Okay? This is not the game that we know. It would not be the same level of competition. Just the idea of 7 innings is enough. The idea of double headers waters down the product. The idea of expanded rosters waters down the product. You would see player numbers would be much higher than you would normally have. The hitters would have a big advantage because they'd be hitting against inferior pitching a lot. But the idea would be to get the games in. That would be the idea. And get the season in, get the games in terms of giving the country something to watch. It'd give them plenty to watch. There'd be plenty of games. And they could have a season. Now, the question I'd like to know is when could they return to some normalcy? When could the fans return to the games? Nobody is going to have any idea about that, even after we start back. And even today, on a day when Andrew Cuomo announced the highest death total ever for New York, 731 deaths. 731. An outrageous number. He's talking about some kind of combination, a combined effort that would allow the tri-state area and the 3 states to start back. But it also would include testing. Everything you see that involves integrating the public back into America involves testing. That's why I have talked about that from day one, because every doctor I have talked to, anybody who understands any part of this has talked about testing will be a huge part of the plan. And you're hearing that now as we are still weeks away probably from any reentry because they're just not equipped for it. And nobody has a plan yet. And we still have to see a real leveling off, especially in the hot areas like Long Island and New York, where the numbers are still outrageous. And we have to see that it's really going down. Yes, fewer trips to the hospital, fewer trips to intensive care, fewer people being intubated, but still a lot of deaths. They are talking about bringing a sport back. They have introduced a schedule for golf, which we'll get to. We gave you yesterday. We'll examine that a little more tomorrow. That will include a great fall if you're a golf fan, if they can get the things done, and if we start back in a reasonable way. But it's hard to see how we're going to return in any reasonable way. It really is. I haven't seen it. It makes a lot of sense yet. And this baseball plan doesn't make a lot of sense. But like we said, these are desperate times. Will this happen? I'm not sure. And as we said, one positive test for the entire baseball population would throw this thing into chaos. One, because one person could infect the whole group. That's how contagious this thing is. That's why we're dealing with something where the only final answers are therapeutics and then ultimately vaccines, which vaccines are at least a year away. Therapeutics, who knows? But again, those are the only final answers. So baseball at least gave everybody something to talk about today. They gave them a possibility of a plan. That's what it is right now, just a possibility of a plan. There are a lot of other things going on. There are a lot of other thoughts about different leagues and different things and different schedules and possibilities. You have to take them all one day at a time. But as we start to envision or discuss re-entry, so to speak, it still is very hard to see how we are going to act anywhere near like we used to act when we don't know who has the virus and who doesn't, who is contagious and who isn't, who is vulnerable and who isn't. Now, all that comes to pass when you know that if you get it, I can give you a medical therapeutic. I can give you a therapeutic that will end it. Then you have a game changer. We don't have that yet. We can talk about rumblings of having it, but we don't have that yet. Not in any real guaranteed way. We have a lot of rumors. We don't have anything that's fact. Now, we all get up and hope and pray. Those of us that want to see this end, hope and pray that happens. We're just not there yet. But yes, baseball is thinking about games in Arizona with no fans. Scratch your head crazy? Yes. Possible? Yeah, possible. Likely? We'll see. Still plenty of obstacles to everything. But every day you get one step closer. At least they have put something on the board. When we come back, we'll chat about a bunch of things with Boston's Bob Ryan. Back after this. And here's how I thought about having Ryan on. I'm last night. I went into my bookcase for a book I was looking at, and Ryan's book fell out, Scribe, and I said, I got to get Ryan on and talk to him. I haven't talked to him in a long time. And then that's when I called my guys today and said, get Bob Ryan on. So we got him, and here he is. Bob, welcome. How are you?
Hey, a long time no talk, Mike. Thank you.
How you doing?
My wife and I are fine. So far, so good. We're both huge readers, which is a huge benefit in these times, and that's a good starting point. I must tell you, I'm addicted to Sirius XM radio for some music, and we're doing the requisite amount of watching the TV, whether it's the sports things or whether it's all the available things. There's so much available. Nobody can complain. Anybody's bored, they're really in trouble. There's always something to do.
I saw Ozark's very good. I have to admit, I watched that. I don't like to recommend a lot of TV, but I watched that. It's really good, well written. A strange show, though, not for the kids, but very interesting.
Yeah, my wife's watched that.
Yes, very good.
I'm aware of it.
What would you recommend that you read recently?
Well, okay. Three things I just knocked off. One was The Last Hope Island, which is about the expatriate governments from Europe during World War II that centered in London, which includes France, but includes many of the other countries in Europe with their heads of state all relocated to London, and how they were able to help in the war effort, and in particular the great effort of the Polish pilots, without which the RAF would never have gotten done what it got done. There was one book. Number two was a book called Dear Successor, and it's about Kim Jong-un, and it's a very interesting insight into the whole whys and wherefores of North Korea, the history, how this dynasty came about. And by the way, we all know tangentially that Kim Jong-un loves basketball. You don't know how much he loves basketball. It's his infatuation with basketball is really phenomenal. And then it gets into the whole Rodman thing and how it came about. And I just got through reading The Soul of America by John Meacham, which I think ought to be read by every member of Congress, particularly those with an R in front of their state affiliation.
Yes, very thoughtful man who we see on TV all the time. He's on MSNBC almost every morning.
So that's what I just put that one to rest about 20 minutes ago, Mike. So I'm plowing through, I'm just waiting to get to a sport. I got plenty of sports books on deck too, but I haven't done a sports book for a while.
And it's funny, folks. Bob and I have both obviously been both fixtures in our cities for many years. But what people don't realize is Bob was from Boston College, was a very close friend and roommate of a guy who actually was an enormous part of my career, Kevin O'Malley, who brought me to CBS back in 1980. So that long ago, and I actually did my interview at Runyon's. Where Kevin held court, and that's where we. That's where we met.
The great, and by the way, the R.I.P. Mr. Healy, who passed away. The great
Joe Healy,
co-owner
absolutely,
of Runyon's, the great Mr. Healy. Kevin and I spoke not too long ago, about 3 or 4 days ago. He lives now in the Tampa area. In fact, we were best friends at college and the best men at each other's wedding, 19 years apart.
So the CBS gets the NCAA tournament and had never done basketball in like 20-something years. So they brought me in to work with the people, including Brett Musburger and their producers and directors who had not done college basketball. And our first tournament was North Carolina, Georgetown, which is how I got to CBS all those many years ago. That there's a connection there, obviously.
You guys got an Emmy for that, too, I believe,
yes,
for that production.
Well, listen, and Bob Fishman, who was always great to me from the beginning, who was a great director. And it's funny, the other day, Bob, I happened on, and what's on, I get the second half on CBS. I didn't realize it was on. It's NC State and Houston, which is my second tournament with CBS, okay, and Albuquerque, with Jimmy V, as you remember. And the thing that jumped out at me, I sat there and it was just starting the second half, and they played it like it was real with commercials and everything else. Yeah. And watching it, you're still stunned how NC State ever won that game, considering how good Houston was. And then what jumps off the screen is how good Olajuwon was. I mean, he's even so much better than I even remember. He was so talented. It almost jumped off the screen how talented he was in that game. I mean, how quick he had come.
Right. He was obviously one of the handful of greatest centers of all time. He had that great, incredible footwork, which is part of the from a soccer background back home, of course. You mentioned Bob Fishman. I have to tell you, I went to Lawrenceville School in Lawrenceville, New Jersey, and I was the sports editor of the school paper. My successor was Bob Fishman. And it was
really?
This very sports knowledgeable kid. He was born and raised in the Virgin Islands.
In the Virgin Islands. His family was a very big, very prominent family in the Virgin Islands.
Yeah,
yes.
But he was a huge sports fan, and I gave him my imprimatur, if you will, and he became Bob Fishman, the great director of basketball and horse racing, and one of the all-time great directors. So yeah, that's my connection. So the world can get very small at times, Mike.
Well, when you realize it, you talked in your book Scribe about going to Boston College and the kind of kids that came from the same background as you, and you even mentioned in the first lines a school that my kids are both, one's in and one's going to, and that's Chaminade. I have one that's in ninth grade and one going into ninth grade next year at Chaminade. So I have one and a daughter at Marymount, and who's a freshman at Marymount in the city, and I have she's a twin, and my son plays football at Chaminade and baseball, and although their baseball season got canceled, and a younger one who's in 8th grade who's going into Chaminade next year. So you mentioned Chaminade prominently right in the beginning of the book, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, New Hyde Park. And my friend, that the reason for that was one of my classmates was a BC basketball player named Jim Kassane, who was a very good player, who I think if he had gotten more serious about it would have been in the NBA. He was really a good athlete. But anyway, he was from Chaminade. That's how I got introduced to the concept of Chaminade, absolutely.
Yeah, and you know who my brother used to be good friends with, who's 2 years younger than me and was a better basketball player than I was, but his best friend, really a kid he hung around with all the time and played with, was Jerry Nolan, who played at Boston College. Remember
Yes,
Jerry
he did.
Nolan? Yes, and he used to live right around the block from us, and was a really good player and a heck of a schoolyard player. When I played against him, he was better than all of us, as a matter of fact, and we played with him all the time.
We had a succession of point guards down through the ages at BC, very admirable, starting with John Austin, and you mentioned Nolan, and we had Billy Evans, who was a terrific one, and then, of course, the ones that people would know much more, John Bagley, Michael Adams, Dana Barrows. That's
Sure.
pretty good for a school.
Very good. You know, it's funny. The other thing I turned on, and this made me think of you, because you probably chronicled his career as much as anybody, was how Bird arrived as the hope in Boston, how the whole thing, the time that Red put him in the stands as he signed and everything else, and how he arrived, and how the team, how bad it was, and how how Rowe was, and how terrible it was, and then all of a sudden here was Bird, and how Bird not only transformed the Celtics but transformed the league. But Bob lived those days and was as close to Bird as anybody there, obviously, as being the guy who was the preeminent writer about the Celtics. But it was fascinating to watch that again, to see how Bird just revolutionized that city after having so much great basketball. And recently, Bob, I was sitting in a pub in Palm Beach, took my family out to dinner, and who comes up? John Havlicek's son. And,
Chris.
Yes, and said, because I knew his mom, and I knew John, obviously, and John obviously just passed away, and I had a dog named Hondo, as a matter of fact, because we loved Havlicek, and I just saw him recently in Palm Beach. So you think of the Celtics, but Bird's arrival and the transformation of that team is amazing stuff. It really is.
Well, first of all, this conversation is getting creepily eerie in terms of cross references, because tomorrow would be John Havlicek's 80th birthday.
Wow.
He would have been 80 tomorrow, and of course he passed away last year.
Yep.
And he's sort of fallen a little bit through the cracks of NBA history, and
not fairly either, too. I mean, terribly.
He was every bit the player that Oscar Robertson and Jerry West were.
Yep.
They have a little more of a higher cachet. One of the problems is he played with Russell, and then anyway.
But Bob, let's be honest. West, Baylor, Havlicek have been especially West. And Oscar, Baylor, Havlicek, that whole group has been treated terribly historically in the last 20 years. Absolutely. They've almost been forgotten. I try to tell people on the show all the time, you don't realize how good John Havlicek was. You don't realize how good Jerry West was, or Oscar, or Elgin Baylor, who people don't even know anything about.
You're preaching to the choir with Baylor. Elgin Baylor invented modern individual basketball moves. Elgin Baylor took basketball from a game that was strictly horizontal and only slightly vertical, and made it strictly and made it horizontal. And it was you can't overstate his importance in the history of basketball. And you're right. And from Elgin Baylor, the lineage goes Dr. J and Michael and LeBron. That's the lineage of that type of player. And so, you're absolutely.
How about Bird, though? Let's get back to Bird's impact.
Bird, yeah. Well, obviously, I was privileged to be here. Just luck of history that Larry Bird popped into my life 10 years into my career in 1979. I started covering the Celtics in 1969-70. And I always say it this way. It was as if I had signed up for an art course, but didn't know who the professor was. And on the first day of class, in walked the professor. It was Michelangelo. Because Larry Bird appeared for me, Bob Ryan, who loved basketball and I think appreciated a lot of things about it. And he was the individual microcosm of everything that was good about basketball. And then to become friendly with him, wind up doing a book with him, to see him play out that career, it was extraordinary. Now, that first year, you're right. They went from 29 wins to 61. Now, it wasn't just Larry. He was the number one reason. But in that year, they hired a real coach, Bill Fitch, because the previous coach had been a player coach who didn't even want the job, with Dave Cowens. They also got a healthy, tiny Archibald back after he had that Achilles injury and was really not much of a player the year before.
Yep.
They signed M.L. Carr, who had led the league in minutes played the year before as a free agent from Detroit, and they had an extra draft choice named Gerald Henderson, who turned out to be a very useful player for them.
Very solid.
So all those things happened. Bird was obviously the number one reason. He was Rookie of the Year. They went from 29 to 61, extraordinary jump, and they wound up losing in the playoffs to Philly, which was fair and square. But you're right. He captivated Boston. He became, so much more than just a great player, but a symbol. Yeah, it was, and I'm just eternally grateful that I was able to be on the ground.
Well, it's amazing that you could have, and we're talking with Bob Bryant, that you could have Cousy, Russell, Havlicek, Sam Jones, Casey Jones, Tommy Heinsohn, go down the line, and then have this renaissance, and a very good Dave Cowens too. I mean, but then have this renaissance with Bird, where it's almost like another wave came across. I mean, after having all that greatness, I mean, Bill Russell, who never lost. I mean, you know what Cousy meant to you guys and to basketball, and then obviously all the other great players, including Havlicek, and then to have the legacy of that and the length of that, the amazing amount of success. And then have Bird come in and almost start another whole wave of it is amazing. It really is.
They took it to a whole. Look, the table had been set, but they took it. But it was never a basketball town. You know this.
Yep.
Most people on the outside don't know this. It was never a basketball town. It was a hockey town.
Yep.
And yes, Russell won the 11 championships, and yes, Havlicek and Cowens won 2 more in '74 and '76. But it still had not been the predominant winter sports interest in Boston, because concurrent with the 70s rise of the Celtics was the great big bad Bruins and Bobby Orr, who's the greatest hockey player of all time, and don't let anybody tell you any different. But anyway, yes, you're right. And that's the only time in Boston sports history that from 1979 through 1988, that period of time, or roughly, when the Celtics were the number one team in town. They were bigger than baseball. They were bigger, and the Patriots didn't matter at all in those days. And they even supplanted the Bruins by the '86 season. They were, and it's the only time in Boston history. It was a magical time to be a Boston a Celtics fan for sure. And Bird was the fulcrum, but obviously you had McHale, you had Robert Parrish, you had the big three, and then, of course, in '85, '86, you had the glorious addition of Bill Walton, giving them the most amazing and, I think, frankly, easily said, the greatest front court in NBA history. And the reason why I still believe that the '85, '86 Celtics are the best team of the pre-3-point mania era, I'm going to have to say we have to divide basketball into certain historical epochs, is that no team ever brought anything resembling a healthy Bill Walton off the bench.
Ridiculous.
There have been other great six men, including Havlicek himself and then McHale. But Bill Walton changed the game in a way each night, in a way that no sixth man, quote unquote, ever did in the history of basketball. And it was the greatest 1-2 center punch in the history of basketball, Parrish and Walton. And you'll never see anything like that again.
He's one of the great. He's an all-time great who you're utilizing as a backup. I mean, when healthy,
right.
an all-time great.
Willingly. And you know what he did? He came to Boston, and he was so thrilled and happy. And the first thing he did was to go to Robert Parrish's house, and go to Robert and say, "Look, I'm not here to take your job. I'm here to support you." And just that was. It was important because Robert was a sensitive person, and he's probably thinking, "What's going on here?" Well, as it turned out, they couldn't have had a better partnership. And the daily practices, Mike, they will all tell you were some of the most phenomenal things.
Had to be. I mean, you had guys who were as technically pure in basketball as anyone could ever be in Bird and Walton. So I mean, and Walton isn't even the boss on that team like he always was in UCLA. I mean, he's an extra guy. I mean, that's unbelievable because of Bird. We're talking with Bob Bryant. Bob, how about let's leave Williams out of this because he's a generation before onto himself. So Brady and Orr's older, but he still has an incredible appeal, obviously, to everyone in Boston. Bird, Big Papi, all four They're on 4 different street corners. Who gets the most attention now? Is it? I mean, they're all different sports. They obviously we know where Brady is at the moment, but how about all 4 of them on a given day right now? How I mean, does time play into it, or
yes, totally today?
Because or there's probably more kids named after Bobby Orr in Boston than anybody else.
But the man of the 21st century is Brady, and Brady has done, because you realize that before Brady, they were the only team in the National Football League whose best player by acclamation was not a skill position player. They were so deficient in star power and in skill positions. Every other team in the league, if you took a poll in 2000 or even and said, who's your best player? Who's your famous player? And every other team would have had a quarterback or a running back.
And you had John Hannah.
Except the Patriots.
Right.
It would have been number 73,
right.
John Hannah.
Yep.
And there wouldn't have been any argument about that.
He's an all-time great player, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, but that, and now, and then comes Tom Brady. Here comes Tom Brady. So, yes, the answer to your question is it would be Tom Brady today. For people over 65, it would be Orr with Bird on the rail. Okay, that's the order. And of course, for people over 80, it would be the Thumper. It would still be Teddy. He still has a tunnel named after him here, and is revered. And baseball has its particular place in Boston. But you'd be totally unrealistic not to give Brady his due with what he has done and how the mark he has left in this town. And so for anybody under 60.
How stunned was the town that Brady left?
It depends. If they were doing their homework, if they were paying attention, they wouldn't be stunned. They'd be disappointed. You could see. I have a mixed sports metaphor, Mike. He was taking a really good walking lead off first base to head to the next destination, wherever that was going to be. It was so clear, and so it was the only question at the end was where it was going to be. No, he clearly left indicators that he was ready to leave Boston.
I always thought that Kraft would play, and I didn't know how Belichick would play it, and I didn't think he'd be very sentimental. But I always thought that Kraft would be the guy who would play matchmaker at the end and would get the deal done. I was surprised that wasn't the case, unless they had already decided they were not going to pay him. I guess maybe they had already decided that.
I agree with you. If you asked me, if we had this discussion a year ago, I would have said, Bob Kraft is not going to let this happen. He's a surrogate son.
He loved him.
He's
Yeah,
not
he
going to
loved
let it
him.
happen.
Yeah.
But it did happen. And then I had for a while I was saying to everybody. I mean, I'm talking about going back, right in the immediate aftermath last month. I was saying to everybody, well, if Belichick had gone to Kraft and said, I gotta have him. I want him. I don't want to lose him. I'm going to die with him. I must have him. Then Kraft would have paid him. And of course Belichick did not do that. But now I'm reassessing. I think Kraft was apparently ready to let it happen. I guess we don't know the whole truth. And the one person we know of the three that we haven't heard anything from, of course, is Belichick. Is he saving it for the ultimate tell-all? I don't know.
No, I don't think there'll ever be one, to be honest with you.
I don't think there will be.
No.
But I think we haven't heard from him. Tom is making it clear he's looking forward to a new challenge, and there's an implication there that he was tired of Belichick, and we were wondering about that. We're definitely wondering about that. But Belichick he gave the pro forma tribute to Tom, yeah. But he never said, he didn't go so far as to say, I can't live without him next year. He didn't say that.
No, and nor would he. I don't think it's in him, to be honest with you. And also, he probably thought Brady had slipped, and Brady has slipped a little. I mean,
it's inevitable.
He's not a kid anymore. He's not a kid anymore.
It's difficult to get the full assessment last year because there's a lack of weaponry, which has been well documented. You know it. You can tell what they didn't have, starting with no viable tight end. And then in the end, the one great reliable receiver was hurt, and not himself, Edelman. And the only thing he really had in the end was James White coming out of the backfield. And so he didn't have much to work with. We know that. But on top of that, there were missed throws, there were bad throws, there was clear slippage of talent. Although Brady insists that he has lost nothing. As recently as yesterday, I read a new interview with him in which he's saying that he's got the full range of his skills. Hi, Tom. This is your chance to prove it.
And he's got good weapons too. He does have good weapons.
Yeah, he's got good weaponry. They're much better on paper than he would have in
and a
England
quarterback-friendly coach. A very quarterback-friendly coach. He's a gambling offensive coach. That's who he is. So he's going to let him throw the ball.
He's also a very different personality, and maybe Tom, after 20 years, is ready for a new one.
Oh, he'll like him. Yeah, he'll like him.
Opposite in the NFL of today, except maybe Pete Carroll, the ultimate, goody two shoes players coach, than Bruce Arians, who's definitely a people person, as opposed to Bill Belichick. And you mentioned the lack of sentiment, and you're so right. About 10 years ago, when the pattern was emerging, and there goes Malloy, and there goes Seymour, and there goes this guy, and Vrabel eventually, and we're going, will there be an exception? Will there be any ounce of sentiment involved when the time comes for Tom? And of course, the clear answer was no.
No, and it never. There's a robotic nature to that. I just think that's part of who he is. And it'll be interesting to see. It'll be fascinating to see how they both do. It really will. I mean, as to which one does better. As a matter of fact, Tampa has a lot of holes on the other side of the ball, which they got to fix, which we'll see. They're going to be a good offensive team, but it's going to be interesting to see what exactly the Pats wind up with this year. They'll be a good defense. They'll be a good defense, but we'll see what they are on the other side of the ball.
If only they were on the schedule this year, but they're not until next year. And
what about his? Had he, in your mind, had he reached the status of a Bird or an Orr or a Williams in town? Was he as big as they were?
Positively, because in fact, the number one story of my entire career here in Boston is the rise of the Patriots from clear fourth place in the local pecking order to one. And the Red Sox were one for a century and plus, well over a century, but you can't argue that any longer. The Patriots, and they've elevated themselves in this town. Now we'll see what happens post Belichick and post Brady, and eventually post Belichick. But now everything's clouded because of the situation that we're living in. No one knows what state sports are going to come back. Right. We don't know which sport will suffer the most from the lack of patronage. We don't know any of these things, so it's all bets are off, and we don't have any idea about what we're going to be talking about in 2021 or 25 or 27.
Are you pro? Are you pro the Arizona?
Brady is number one.
Are you pro the Arizona since you went there?
No.
Do you like now? Listen.
I think it's impractical.
It's very impractical. How about 7-inning game doubleheaders?
That's okay. I'm okay with that. If they were to get in the event, and once again, none of us know, in the event that they could feasibly construct a limited baseball season, I would have no problem in the circumstances that we would be living in with 7-inning doubleheaders in baseball. In fact, I would hope that they would not be day-night split doubleheaders, but that's probably asking for too much.
No, they won't be. They'll be regular doubleheaders, I think, because they don't care about admission here. And
well, then, all right. But I would. But if they chose to go, if they were,
you're going to have 20-man pitching staff, though. That's the thing.
I know that's the only problem. The games would be
they're going to be watered down. You're going to be hitting off a lot of AAA pitchers because each team's going to have a ton of pitchers on the team.
Well, that's right. The way that they have allowed pitching to evolve, or they chose to allow.
Yeah, and they're talking about having massively expanded rosters. I had Bobby V on the other day. Bobby says, "Hey, these teams are going to have 15, 17 pitchers on these teams."
My God, I cringe at the thought. I love baseball. Number one. It's been part of my life since 1951, for God's sake. But I even that before that, I guess. But I cringe at that thought. I mean, baseball has baseball. Look, no sport needed this problem, but baseball was under attack anyway. Baseball was under legitimate attack and scrutiny for the ridiculous length of the games and the way the game has evolved and the way they play the game now and the shifting and all the stuff that was distorting the game that we once loved and it didn't need any. And it's the last thing it needs is a wholesale revolution, I think.
And now you're talking about. I mean, some of the stuff we're talking about, Brian. Electric strike zone. No mound visits, mic'd players, 7-inning doubleheaders, teams sitting in the stands so they can sit 6 feet apart.
No, none of this is. I don't know when. it's all fine. We can speculate. We can concoct all these scenarios. But until the health authorities, the proper people, tell people that it's okay for all of us to congregate in any form of that nature, or for players to get together of that nature, and even if you're talking about playing in empty stands in any sport that we're talking about, there's support personnel involved. There's myriad issues involved. They're talking about isolating people for weeks in time. There's families involved. Players aren't going to want to.
One positive test throws the whole thing up in the air, too.
Yeah.
One positive test.
Right. I mean, it's not feasible. I don't even want to entertain. I'm not, people, we're all, we all want something to talk about, but I mean, the fact of the matter is that it's really almost drivel to start speculating about what might happen until the authorities and the legitimate health authorities tell us where we are.
Well, how about the NBA plan? What was your thought about that? Having eight teams East, eight teams West, and playing playoffs in almost seclusion too. I mean,
well, if the format, the NBA as opposed to the NHL has a very simple format playoff delineation now. We know who the 16 teams would be if we drew. But you don't know it in the NHL. I don't know how they would find out deciding.
I don't know how it's going to work for hockey anyway. I think hockey's in a tough place. Yes,
it's clear.
Absolutely.
They've got a nice line drawn in both conferences. We know who the eight. But in terms of sequestering people for quarantining, whatever word you want to use, in one place for weeks at a time, guys got families. I don't think they're going to go for that. No, all these ideas are I'm not. I'm just not on board with almost any of them.
Problem is that money talks. You know how it is. I mean, they're trying to get TV revenue back. Yeah, they're trying to get TV. Trying to squeeze some revenue out of these seasons.
It's so incredibly complicated, and it wears you out.
How much have you missed sports unbelievably, or has it been not as bad as you thought it would be?
I haven't had a withdrawal symptom yet. Because as I said, I am a reader. I'm a huge reader. I've knocked off 3 books in a very short period of time, and as this thing's going on, and I'm ready to start on the next one tonight. I still haven't exhausted the possibilities of what's available to get myself involved in some of these programs on TV that on your computer. There's all kinds of stuff ahead of me. I'm coping so far. I really am, and I'm feeling okay. My wife and I feel okay.
Which is key. You got this. You got to make.
I mean, of course, Mike, if this was you, it's been my life. I mean, I was born into a sports family. My father was involved in all aspects of sports in terms of promotion, marketing, etc. I never knew another life. I always say to people,
what was your father? Tell me about what did your father do?
Well, my father, Bill Ryan, was a noted guy in Trenton, New Jersey.
Right.
He was a promoter, was a marketer. He helped form a basketball league back in the late. Right after the war, a semi-professional kind of league.
Right.
He was involved with the Trenton Giants Interstate League Class B baseball.
Right.
I was president when Willie Mays made his debut in 1950 in Trenton. I was at the game. That's what the family always told me. I was because I went to all the games that year with the family. My father then went to Villanova as an assistant athletic director in 52 to 54.
Really, I didn't know that. So he was he was the AD at Villanova, huh?
Oh, yeah, and under Bud Dudley, and he created this idea, the grocery bowl, where if you bought $10 worth of groceries at the Acme Market, you got a free ticket to a Villanova game, and they sold out the Municipal Stadium, 90,000 people for Ole Miss and Kentucky and the likes of that. It was my father's promotion.
But so how did you not go to Villanova?
No, well, I wanted to at first, but my mother was a very wise woman in this regard, and she didn't want me to go to school that close to home. And I wound up going to BC, and she thought it was good for me to get away.
She was right.
I did.
She was right.
Yeah, very, very prescient. But I would say to people this, Mike.
So you grew up in Trenton, right? You grew up in Trenton.
A time in my life when we weren't at a game, going to a game, or getting ready to go to a game. That's my DNA.
And, well, mine too, from as far back as I can, and I don't have that background because I didn't have a father growing up. But I tell you, it's all I remember. I mean, to be honest with you, and I've missed it. You keep yourself busy, but I have missed it. The games, especially. I have to admit, I really missed the NCAA tournament because I love those 17 days. I love those days where there's wall-to-wall games and I can zero in on those teams. And then, talk to a bunch of the coaches after the game. I always have a handful that I talk to after every game, and 3 or 4 that I follow, and that I know well and root for and stuff. Although Majerus was one of them, he's gone, but still Jay Wright's one as an example, and I talk to every game and stuff. And you have those, and you follow the team through the tournament and stuff like that, and then you're right on to the Masters after that, which I love. So, and opening day is right there, jammed in the middle. So it's a great time of year. It's a time of year you look forward to. So I have to admit, it's left a void, but especially baseball, because baseball is a great companion for people every day. It really is. And as you get a little older, baseball's there. If you're around the house more, baseball's there every day. And baseball on the radio is great. It's great in the backyard. It's great at the pool. I mean, the whole thing. You miss it when it's there every day. And I've always been a guy that you follow baseball on a daily basis. I'm sure you do the same thing. And you have
this would have
forever.
been my 33rd Final Four. We were going.
Right.
And ever since I stopped,
you've been to more than I have. That's more than I've been to.
I officially retired from the Globe full time in 2012.
Right.
But I've continued to go to the most of the subsequent Final Fours because, like you, it's one of my favorite things on the whole, if not the single favorite thing in this whole sports calendar. I do miss the March Madness. There's no doubt. I do miss being. We would have been to, the championship game.
Yep.
Would have been last night.
Last night, as a matter of fact. Absolutely.
Yeah. And of course I think about that. I think about that a lot. Oh, sure. There's things, no question. This is a particularly vibrant period of time. This in the fall, I love when everything is going on at once, and all 4 sports are in 3 of the 4 are in vogue, and it's fall. You got all 4 at one point.
And this is the craziest thing we've ever lived through. Even 9/11 wasn't like this. This is the strangest. I mean, because what, we're sitting here today. We're about, I don't know how many days into this, 20-something days, whatever it is that we've been in the house, but we don't even have an answer yet. So we don't even have a direction yet. So, I mean, we don't have any answers. At least on 9/11, we were back to being directed. We were at a game 11 days later. I remember the Mets asked Dog and I to go in and do the program from Shea Stadium that day so that they felt that, that we would calm everybody down, that it would be, a day, it would be important that they'd hear us on the air. Fred called me and asked us to go in there that day. I still remember it like it was yesterday. Piazza hits the home run, and the city was so united, and the world was so united, as we know. But this is very different. Very,
well, it's
very
totally different because that sports was the classic healer, and now
yes.
we're all losing it, and and it's not just the thing is we're talking about sports, but just it's so much every part of the entertainment world. The musicians who aren't going to get paid with the gigs that are canceled, the theaters, the local
Broadway,
theaters,
Broadway
that are all across the country.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of the sports bars, but back to the other kinds of entertainment. It's sports, it's music, it's entertainment of every form, and that we don't have, and that people are losing their livelihoods are threatened. We haven't been in the country. We've never ever. We had world wars. Yes, that was but we've never been through anything of this nature. And we have no idea how we're going to come out of it. But traditionally Americans have learned how to pull together and do that. And let's only hope that we've got the proper leadership to get us through it.
Well, listen, good to talk to you. Be well. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks very much for a couple minutes. Thank you very much. Bob Ryan, back after this. We'll be right back. You'd come off, finally, you crowned the champion last night, which was the culmination of kind of 17 days that you just zeroed into that tournament. I mean, that's what I always did. That tournament kind of took center stage for 17 days. You had baseball in between. You had opening day during that time. You always had plenty of baseball during that time. But you had 17 days of that tournament. Now you finally have crowned the champion, and your attention turns right ahead to the Masters, which will be Thursday. And, I would know guys, including Jim Nantz, who would be going from the championship game right to Augusta. Some years I wasn't planning on going this year. I've gone other years. I've been there on Wednesday. I've been there on opening day on Thursday. I've been there a handful of times. Nothing like it. Now they've rescheduled the Masters for November. I'm hoping there will be a Masters in November. I mean, if you're a golf fan, They have set up a year that will give you something to really look forward to. Right now, you're looking at the British Open as postponed for this year, but you're looking at the PGA being played in August, the U.S. Open being played at Wingfoot in September. Then you have from the 22nd to the 27th of September, you have the Ryder Cup in Whistling Straits in Wisconsin, in Kohler, Wisconsin. They didn't want to touch the Ryder Cup. And then November, I believe it's 13 to 17. Don't hold me to those dates, but I'm pretty sure it's 13 to 17. It might be 12 to 16, but I think it's 13 to 17. The Masters is scheduled in November. And what that costs, I'm going to get Breed on probably tomorrow or the next day. He was an assistant at Augusta for years. That course is burnt out, and then it opens again in the fall. They don't have it open. They burn it out in the summer, and they reopen it in the fall. So I want him to tell us how that course will be different in the fall for the players. It'll be very different. I mean, the foliage will be different. The trees will be different. The winds will be different. Everything will be different. It'll still be calm there. It'll still be mild. I'm even thinking of going this year in November to that, but we'll see. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. It's right before Thanksgiving. I don't know if I'll go or not, but we'll see. I thought my first inclination was to go, but we'll see. But think about it. If you're a golf fan and you've missed not having any of these championships, you didn't have the players, and you would have had Augusta this week. You're now looking at a great August and September into the Masters in November. I mean, you got a great, great setup of golf right now if we can get back. And again, it's a big if. Because right now as we look at this whole plan, and they talk about any plan to reopen the country, most likely at the end of the month. Now, remember, the federal government can't open up each state. The states have to open themselves up. But if there is a concerted effort to open things up at the end of the month, what does that mean exactly? If you don't know any more about your condition than you do now, you're still going to fear the virus because there's no remedy. Your fear is that you could be one of the people who doesn't react well to it and is one of the 10% who winds up having a serious reaction to the fact that it attacked the linings of your lung, and you could be in harm's way, as we've seen many times already. And once that happens, there's no answer. And they're racing to get a therapeutic that works. We pray and hope and pray they do. We wouldn't then have 12,300 people already dead. We had 731 deaths in New York last night. That's an insane number of deaths. They just don't have an answer. And then if you don't know more about your status or more about, are you going to get into a crowded subway? Are you going to get into a crowded elevator? Are you going to walk into a crowded office? Are you going to walk into a crowded restaurant? Are you going to jam into a Broadway play or a concert at Radio City or a concert at Madison Square Garden or a game at Madison Square Garden or a game at Yankee Stadium? without knowing anything about where the status of anybody and not knowing if there is a medicine out there that can save you if you get it, I don't see that happening. I don't see people coming back and getting on air, getting on subways and getting on trains and getting on airplanes and sitting in hotel rooms and traveling and going to ball games unless they have a level of certitude and comfort. And baseball's plan included massive testing. Cuomo's plan today about reopening up the tri-state area included massive testing. Is that testing going to be easy? No. Is it going to be easy to test the state? No. Is it going to be easy to test the city? No. You might have to get employers involved. You might have to go to work and everybody at your work lines up and takes the test. If the test can be given readily in 5 minutes at your office, voila. Maybe it's done at schools. Maybe it's done at who knows where it's done. I'm telling you right now, if you send your kid to camp this summer, I guarantee he's going to have to get this test. Before you go back to school next fall, I guarantee your kids are going to have to get this test. Before they go to college next year, I bet you your kids are going to have to get this test. Seems to me to be the only way. All right, when we come back, we'll be joined on FAN.
He'll get you the sports any way that he can. It's Mike Francesa on the Fan. Sports Radio 66 and 101.9 FM, WFAN.
All right, we join you on a Tuesday night on the Fan. Take it till 6:30. Also on radio.com, which we begin every night at 5. We join the Fan at 6. Brought to you by Casamigos Tequila, as always. Brought to you by those who drink it. And we thank them for their patronage each and every night. We would have had an NCAA champion crown last night. We would have been looking to a Masters on Thursday. That will not be the case. We now maybe will look to a Masters in November in a rescheduled golf year. We'll see how that plays. We're dealing with right now the idea of baseball in Arizona. Just looking at this plan now and the possibility of this plan existing. And again, it's a little early. You have to look at all the possibilities, and you realize there are a lot of things that have to happen before this plan even gets underway. There are plenty of things that you look at and say, no way, fine. You have to look at these things. You have to, with an open, really with an open mind, because this is a different time. And you know what? They're trying to get something done. They're trying to salvage something here. And it won't be easy. And it's not perfect, that's for sure. And the idea of taking a whole bunch of players out to Arizona and playing 7-inning doubleheaders and having the players in stadiums where no one else is and isolating the players for weeks on end, and realizing that there will be a massive amount of testing that's involved, and one positive test could throw the whole thing up in the air. That's all it would take. It would only take one test for it to change. For it to be a completely different year and for them to pack the whole thing up. There's a lot of things to look at. The size of the rosters, modifications to the game. They're talking about 7 innings. They're talking about doubleheaders. All in Arizona. Players, isolated, place to live, to the ballparks. That's it. Major amount of testing would have to be done because the players all have to know that their health has been ensured, that everybody that is there has been accounted for. Not an easy thing. Expanded rosters. Could have as many as 20 pitchers on a roster. You're going to need a massive amount of pitchers in any one of these scenarios. There's going to be a lot of pitching involved, and that means a lot of pitchers who wouldn't normally be in the majors will be on the rosters and will be active on these rosters. But this is a different time. That's all there is to it. And they're talking about things like electronic strike zone, no mound visits, players being mic'd, so because this is a TV production, obviously. The team sitting in the stands between the innings because, hey, no one else is using the stands, and it gives them a chance to have separation. They're not all jammed in the dugout. That's if this thing even gets off the ground, and we don't know that it does. We are days away, weeks away, and until the country figures out a way to reopen, and each state figures out a way to reopen, and I don't know how that happens without massive testing, because that's the mapping, that's the pathway that everyone talks about. Cuomo talked about today reopening for the first time, a plan for reopening with Connecticut and New Jersey, and talked about massive testing. That would have to be done. Who knows? Is it done block by block in your neighborhood? Is it done in your office? Is it done at the schools and your offices? Is it done where you have to go to some area to get it done in each town? Who knows how it happens? But there's got to be some way to separate who has the virus, who doesn't, who's already has built up antibodies and is not going to get it again and is free to move in the society, and who isn't, until this stuff happens. See, the problem every day with what we watch is the president comes on this time of day right now. He's on. And he's got to answer to the attacks that he has taken today, like in the Washington Post or the New York Times, where they'll say, and I'm not saying they don't have evidence that shows that he was late to the dance. They do. Fine, they do. So they attack that. So he has to come on today and make his point about how I did this. I'm blaming this one for that. I'm blaming this one for that. I'm blaming this one for that, because he's trying to get reelected. And he's trying to counter the attacks he takes every day. So instead of it being constructive, instead of it being informative, it's defensive in nature, and it is meant to brand and to market. And that's not positive for what we're trying to do. But it's a political year. It's a year where we're going to vote for a new president. And this is going to be the central theme of any campaign. Look at the time. This is going to take us right into the summer. And then you're going to have a couple of months to the election. The election's going to come on us like a snap of a finger now. Hey, we might not be out of the house until late May or June, and the next thing you know, it'll be September before you blink. It'll be November before you blink. And there's going to be an election. By Constitution, there's going to be one. So that's why we wind up with that being, instead of it being about us and about how we're going to get healthy and how we're going to get back and how we're going to play this safe, it's a lot of blame game, point fingers, defend, deflect, and it's counterproductive. So baseball now has at least thrown something on the table for us to look at. Is it easy to pick apart? Very easy. You have to look at it with an open mind. What they're trying to do is they're trying to salvage something. They're trying to salvage a season. They're trying to salvage some TV revenue. They're trying to basically put something in the books and also not just cancel an entire year to this. Is it going to be perfect? No. If you're a purist, you're going to love it? Probably not. Some of you might like it. Who knows? It'll be different. It'll be very, very different. And if it's played in the years to come, it will be talked about for a very, very long time. That's the way this goes. We're living in a very strange time. We're living through something that none of us, I have to admit, I never once in my life, and I think everyone, I think everyone in America, this side of someone who does this for a living, who is involved in infectious diseases or spends their life in a laboratory, every other one of us, I don't care who it is, not one of us has ever seriously sat down and said, all right, let me think of what would happen if we actually had a disease or a virus run uncontrollable through our ranks. We've never thought of such a thing. Not once. And when we first heard about this and kept reading about, and I read about Wuhan in the Wall Street Journal probably every day. My Wall Street Journal comes the night before on my phone. And it's a great newspaper. Great reporters. Really, they do they're very talented people. And they wrote about that. I can't tell you how many times I passed up stories on that stuff that I saw. I never sat down and said, wait a second. We have to, but that's not my job to do that. Somebody in the administration should have been doing that. We understand that. We all understand that. That won't happen again. It's easy why no one took it seriously because it's never happened before. That's why. Who would have thought it would be like this? No one. You couldn't. If you had submitted this as as a scenario in a book or a movie, no one would have believed it. That something like this would shut down our nation, no one would have believed it. Not even a little. And it has, without question, just stopped us cold. And coming back from that's not easy. Getting back to some sense of normalcy is not easy. And I'll tell you this. I thought this the other night. I thought this walking up the stairs about 2 o'clock in the morning. I thought this. I was in my office doing some work, and I was walking up the stairs, and I said, think of how many things that we do that we miss right now. That we take for granted, that really we never even say, wow, how lucky are we to have this or that or this. And think about it right now, be it a ball game tonight or getting to see the Masters be played this week or going out this weekend with your buddies and playing golf or just going to a restaurant tomorrow night or to a movie or a Broadway play or a concert or just going to the shopping center and just taking a walk and browsing through the stores. And I could list 50 more. And we take every one of them for granted. And you stop and you say, man, how good do we have it? Until you take those things away from your normal life, do you realize how lucky you really are? How fortunate we are for the things we have that we just take for granted every single day till they're not around. And you'd say, wow, what I wouldn't give to do this evening. And you can fill in the blank. Back after this. To restarting some kind of schedule. But a couple of things have to happen before that ever begins. We have to have a couple of elementary steps, and I don't know when those happen. I mean, we don't have the first part of this, because how comfortable are you going to be until you know? I mean, if you're someone who, there's this thought of, and they thought of this in Great Britain. They even considered the idea of just letting it run its course, where they just say, oh, you know what, our population will get it, they'll get over it, and we'll just deal with the consequences. I even asked a couple of doctors here who were specialists in this stuff, hey, what if we had done that here? And they were like, we don't have first of all, too big. Secondly, we don't have the heart for that, because there would have been a lot more death even than we had now. But now we have to deal with the idea of doing this and coming back with some kind of plan that works economically and also works from a health and safety aspect. And frankly, I haven't seen anything that even makes any sense yet. You know, even the idea of what they're talking about with baseball, one positive test, one out of all those players, by their own admission, it's over. The whole plan gets scrapped. So if they test the guys on the way in the door and they get one positive, guys shut the whole thing down. Or if, let's say, they say we're going to test there and then we're going to test 2 weeks later, and they test 2 weeks later and they get a positive, well, now they've been out there for 10 days or 2 weeks, and now they got to shut the whole thing down. So there is not that's going on that premise and then starting this and then knowing you'll be holding your breath when you take those tests, man, when you realize that one positive test could set you back that far. I mean, that is difficult to deal with. It really is. That's difficult to kind of rationalize that that's going to be our plan, because you're going to move a lot of people around. You're going to put a lot of money into this. You're going to have to logistically do a lot of things to get this thing set up, and then you're going to, on the way in, test everybody. And then one guy remember, in the NBA, how many guys tested positive? You had 4 on the Nets. You had other teams with positive tests. You know, this whole thing started, the shutdown of the nation really started with the NBA. Adam got the positive and then shut the league down. And that was it. Everybody followed suit. Everything happened right. If you remember that night, you got the whole thing with the Jazz and the league. You got Adam then turns and shuts the league down. Then right on top of that, Hanks gets it. Tom Hanks and his wife get it as they're shooting a movie, I think in Australia, if I remember right. And within a couple of hours, everything shut down. One followed the other, followed the other, followed the other. Within a couple of days, everybody was shut down completely. So, if one positive test, and we've already seen players, test positively a couple of times. If one in this highly and these guys tell you, every doctor that I've talked to about this has said it is highly contagious. Now, what percentage is going to make you gravely ill, where you're going to be battling something, it might not be more than, you got a 1 in 10 chance of getting reasonably sick, and then out of that, you have a 1 in 10 chance of being really in trouble. I understand that's not going to happen to a lot of people, but you know what? If you're the one, you're not going to want it, because if you're the one look at the Prime Minister right now. He's getting the best care in the world, and he winds up in intensive care. He winds up for them to have to take him and let him be there and deal with what he's dealing there and not be able to be vocal or anything. It's crazy stuff. So we'll have to take it again. It's not like we have a lot of plans here. We'll just have to take this, and the uncertainty of it makes it very tough. Just take it one day at a time. And obviously we could, and I don't want to sit here and punch holes in the baseball plan right now, and it's easy to do, but let's give them a chance to formulate something. Think it through a little bit. Throw it out there. Look at the good things and the bad things, and because obviously this is different times. You want to try and give them a chance to mold something, but you do know that there's always going to be that part of it where a positive test will floor it. Ed in Long Island starts us off. What's up, Ed?
Hey, Mike, I'm not trying to bypass this horrible situation, but, Al Kaline passed away the other day.
Yeah, we talked about it last night. We talked about it last night.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear the show.
Yeah.
But one of the things I remember him doing, and this was in the late 60s, early 70s against the Yankees, he was obviously playing right field, and a guy hit a blooper. The guy who was pitching for the Tigers had a no-hitter probably in the fifth or sixth inning. Guy hits a blooper to right field. Mm-hmm. It drops in front of Kaline. He charges the ball and throws it to first, almost getting the guy out and preserving the no-hitter. I mean, that's the kind of player he was.
He was a great player. Was a wonderful. He wasn't a great power hitter. He was a 300 hitter. Thanks for the call. He was a tremendous fielder. He was a 10-time Gold Glove winner. Great arm. Wonderful outfielder. Clutch hitter. Classy player. I mean, Hall of Famer, the whole thing. I mean, the guy never hit 30 home runs in a season and played in Tiger Stadium, which is a great park. Mickey used to say that if he could play in any park, I mean, Mickey didn't brag, and they asked Mickey, and Mickey said, I would hit 1,000 home runs in Tiger Stadium. All right, and he wasn't bragging, and he said that because left and right was, as long as if you could pull the ball, you were going to hit it a ton. Now, Mickey hit it all over the place, but still, in that park, his pop-ups were going to go out left and right. But he wasn't a home run hitter, but he hit 399 homers, if you know what I mean. That's a guy who he hit a lot of homers, but he wasn't what you consider a home run hitter, There's a difference. But he was a line drive hitter, a 300 hitter who hit 297 for his career, had 3,000 hits, was a perennial all-star, won a batting crown when he was a baby, and was a very classy player, Al Kaline. Really was. Wonderful. That's a special player, Al Kaline. He really is. Mike in Hackensack, what's up, Mike?
Thank you so much for taking my call.
Yeah.
Mike, I'm following up with what you said on Sunday in respect to, going after these guys. They're very unscrupulous, going after them for hoarding medical supplies and selling them at astronomically high prices. I did read that there was a gentleman that was arrested by federal agents in Brooklyn.
Good. I hope they throw away the key. I know a woman. She's a friend of mine for a long time. She sources all 7 hospitals in the Catholic chain. And she said it is sickening what they're doing when she's trying to get products for the hospitals. Sickening how much they're charging. So, shame on these people. Yeah. I mean, think about it. We're in a crisis. We're sending these nurses out and these technicians out in stuff where if you don't put them in the right garb or the right equipment, they get sick. I mean, these people are risking their lives, and these guys are something costs 70 cents. Thanks for the call. Something that costs 70 cents wholesale, they want $7 for, and tell you to take it or leave it. I mean, that's shameful. I mean, they have a heart. I mean, how can you? And thanks for the call. How can you treat people that way in a crisis? How can you treat people that way anytime? But how can you treat people that way in a crisis? You know what? They should find these guys and throw away the key. Let them spend a couple of months in a rough jail somewhere. Nick in Guilford, what's up, Nick?
I don't think one positive test is going to shut the whole thing down because they're probably going to test them weeks ahead.
Baseball said that one positive test would shut down the whole thing is what they said. I didn't say it. They said it.
Well, maybe while it's going on, but they're going to have the most advanced testing. They're probably going to have those antibodies.
Well, they're looking for the test right now. They said they have to find a test that they can work with. They're looking for testing right now, but they said the delicate part of it is they really feel that if a player gets one test, the rest of the players aren't going to want to play. So that's the fear, that they have to be that meticulous about it, and they have to find the testing that will work. So you're right, but not everybody's going to be to the point where they're going to have antibodies. Some people are going to be asymptomatic, where you're not going to know whether they had it or not, and you're going to have to live with that. There's no way around it.
But they're going to test weeks ahead of time. They have a
Yes.
test now
Yes.
that comes back in 15 minutes.
Yes, except
So they're
that
gonna
right
test
now
weeks
the antibody test is not ready yet.
All right.
The antibody test is not ready yet. The other test is ready that you can test, and they hope to have an antibody test within a couple of weeks that will test within 5 or 10 minutes.
All right. Yeah. No, they have it for 15 minutes. That's
Well,
what
but
Cuomo
they
was saying.
can't mass. It hasn't been mass produced yet, according to the
Right.
reports. They have to mass produce this test.
But they're going to get the most advanced
Right.
test.
I agree
And
with
like I
that.
said, they're going to test them at weeks ahead of time, and then they're going to, if they test negative, obviously they're going to keep them sequestered, and then when they're going to test them just before they come to camp, and once they're in camp, and by the time if they have the antibody test, I think that if
But
one
remember,
player, they're just going to tell those
you're
players.
going to have asymptomatic players too, though. So you're going to have to test more than once because you're going
But
to.
it
Not
takes
everybody's in the same stage. You're going to have guys who have had it and aren't going to get it again. They're fine, but you're going to have guys who haven't had it yet, who are asymptomatic. You're not going to know if they ever had it yet, and those guys, that's a problem. I mean, so again, hey, hopefully it works for them. I agree. This is a nightmare, and thanks for the call. It's a complete nightmare, and they will have the best testing. You know that. Baseball's got plenty of money. They will. I agree with you. They will have the best testing. They will do a great job in testing. I agree with you. But they're the ones who said one positive test would shut us down. So that's why we have to be meticulous in this area, because the players don't want to deal with the fact that they're going to get sick. The players want to know that they're healthy. Players worry about their health more than anything else. Everyone worries about players' health more than everything else. So the players have to feel comfortable that they're not going to get sick. And that's why there's going to be tests. There's going to have to be multiple testing. And they're going to have to, you're right, get every kind of test known to man and be able to test multiple times for these guys. And hopefully, I hope it works. Listen, I hope they play. Why wouldn't I want them to play? Them not being here, not playing versus playing in Arizona. If the best I'm going to get is them playing in Arizona, play in Arizona. I'm fine with that. I mean, listen, it's not perfect, but if the other option is not playing at all, then play in Arizona. And you just got to test all. Remember, you're going to bring managers there who aren't young. You're going to bring broadcasters there who aren't young. You're going to bring cameramen there who aren't young. So it's not just the players. You're going to bring people who work in the TV business, and I don't know if they're going to do radio for the games or not. They probably will. I guess, why wouldn't they? They can do it. But you're going to bring people there who aren't young, who are going to be worried about their health also, who are going to want to have been tested also. So, I mean, there's a lot to deal with there. All right, Casamigos Tequila, as always, sponsors the program, brought to you by those who drink it. We'll see you tomorrow.